Hey, what's up guys? Cookie here. Today I'm going to go over all 10 of the major boss fights in Star Wars Jedi Survivor and rank them from worst to best. Jedi Fallen Order was known for having some epic boss fights that were both unique and seriously challenging, and Jedi Survivor only improved on that formula. But which ones were the very best? Well, let's find out. First off, we have the Golden Skryton boss fight. This boss fight is fine, but not particularly unique. The boss is just a bigger version of the smaller boss Skryton, and it has a recolor. The setting of the fight is not particularly cool or memorable since it's just the den of the creature, and there's just sand everywhere. There also isn't a whole lot of movesets that the creature performs. It mostly just blocks with its big claw, and will do a stabbing and swiping motion with its tail. This also makes for a rather annoying battle because you can't really hit the monster for the most part until it has a very small window to attack. Because of all this, the fight just becomes pretty one-dimensional. The claw being able to be cut off and the final killing blow by Cal is very satisfying, but still, overall, this fight is pretty forgettable. The second worst major boss fight is the second boss fight with Dagan Guerra, which doesn't have a whole lot going on, even if it does show us more of what Dagan can do with his severed arm. The spinning lightsaber motion that Dagan does throughout this fight creates a tricky situation for the player where they have to account for two objects in motion at the same time. They have to look out for the lightsaber with a life of its own, and for Dagan himself. However, there's not much else to say about this fight. It isn't very difficult, and doesn't do a lot for the story. It's fine, but doesn't compare particularly well with other fights in the game. The only unique thing is to basically point out how cool Dagan's power can be despite missing an arm. Next up is the first boss battle with Dagan Guerra. This duel is more story-driven than an epic boss fight, but it does still have some very cool characteristics to it. First off, the area the fight takes place in is one of the cooler venues for a boss fight in the game. With creepy-looking roots and vines spread out across the walls, and a generally foreboding sense created by the coloring of the room, makes for a very cool comparison between the room's look and the situation that is taking place. Dagan Guerra also looks epic coming out of the bacta tank and switching his kyber crystal to announce himself for the dark side. Also being able to force push Cal with his severed arm part of his body was a pretty cool touch. As for the combat itself, there's nothing too unique here, just basic lightsaber moves in which some were unavoidable, but players are not challenged too much on this boss battle, which isn't too much of a surprise considering we'd be seeing more of him and he just woke out of like 100 years sleep, so yeah, he's a bit rusty. Either way, it's a fun introduction to the main antagonist for the majority of the story. Coming in 7th place is the opening boss fight of the game, the Ninth Sister. This is a pretty great way to start off the game. We get to see a familiar face from Jedi Fallen Order when the Ninth Sister arrives on Coruscant to try to finish off Cal after an ambush on him and his crew. The setting of this fight is always going to be cool because, well, it's on Coruscant, and pretty much anywhere on this planet is going to make an epic and cool setting for a fight. So it has that going for it first off. I also think the creativity of the combat in this boss is interesting because she uses the Force to create an issue for the player where they can't just blindly attack her because she can avoid every move that they make. The player has to use patience and wait for the right attack at the right time in order to beat her. The Ninth Sister also makes good use of her double-bladed Inquisitor lightsaber by spinning it like a guard for herself and using its spinning function to throw it in a spiral motion. However, I think it's the ending of this fight that stands out to me. Cal shows that despite watching some of his friends die just minutes earlier, he wouldn't let that cloud his mind in the moment. Instead of being motivated by vengeance when the Ninth Sister has all but lost, he shows sympathy for her as a former Jedi Knight and simply decides to set her free. It was a neat moment and gets the game off to a good start. In 6th, it's the final boss fight of the game, which is the showdown with Bode. The boss battle had a little bit of everything when it comes to the combat, since Bode does more than just fight with a lightsaber. Bode uses the blaster stance during his fight, incorporating it multiple times to catch you off guard with blaster fire. He also uses grenades in the fight, although this mechanic is pretty easy to avoid and also a bit strange since he basically just throws them onto himself more than he does throw them at Cal. Bode also incorporates quite a bit of force powers, but most of them are second-hand at this point in the game because we've seen them from other bosses like Darth Vader and Dagan Guerra. One part of the combat that is unique is the involvement of Night Sister Merrin, which is used a lot early in the fight, but more sparingly as the fight goes on. It's kind of weird that she suddenly tells you that she'll attack from the shadows, but ultimately does nearly nothing for the rest of the fight. This is also the only boss fight where you have the dark side ability unlocked, which can give this fight a whole other dynamic. The cutscenes are very cool and show you going through Merrin's portal as well as a 2v1 battle, although short between between the three characters. One of the biggest problems with this fight is the story surrounding it, since Bode's intentions are unclear and seem frankly kinda dumb. So even if the combat of the fight is good, it's missing some of the story-fueled intrigue that a final boss fight really needs. Bode just seems to be fighting for something that makes absolutely no sense. It's not a bad fight though, just maybe not worthy of being the penultimate moment in the game. Next up, starting off the top 5, is Ravis. The fight with Ravis is one that is almost like a combination of a monster with a bounty hunter fight. Ravis hits very hard like a creature boss fight, but he also has a lot of unblockable attacks, also similar to a rancor type boss fight. However, Ravis also will break out a blaster and shoot at you to keep you on your toes, and a missile barrage that makes more sense than Bode's grenades since they come at you and are less easily avoided. This boss fight involves a lot of avoidance. Blocking with the lightsaber isn't as useful as it is in the other boss fights, and you really have to make sure you have the stamina to do it because, as I said earlier, Ravis hits very hard. I wouldn't say this boss fight majorly stood out, but it was a fun enough fight and managed to show off Ravis's personality as more of a warrior who respected the art of combat than maybe what we had been led to believe about him before the fight. In 4th place is the spawn of Ogdo. The developers had some fun with this boss fight, bringing back the famous and somewhat hated Ogdo Bogdo boss fight from the Jedi Fallen Order by bringing its spawn to the sequel. The spawn of Ogdo boss fight is pretty damn difficult, similarly to its predecessor. Ogdo doesn't have a whole lot of different moves that it pulls on you, but the moves that it does pull are especially painful and are definitely a memorable punishment should you fail to avoid the attacks. The worst failure, of course, would be to avoid the tongue attack because, well, that's a one-hit kill for you and you'll have to start again. Having that instant death potential hanging over your head adds a lot of suspense to the battle and makes it very tough to attack because you don't want to be left unguarded and unable to dodge. Especially at harder difficulties, this battle is sure to keep you on your toes. This fight gets bonus points though for having one of the most unique and cool entrances to a battle because the fight really comes out of nowhere. While traversing the elevated buildings of Fort Callan, you'll come to what almost looks like a landing pad full of droids and a special treasure, except it's fake, and you're actually being dropped into an enclosed pit with a monster. Very Return of the Jedi Rancor style. This introduction to the creature alone would make this a great boss fight, and for more Jedi Fallen Order nostalgia, after you defeat the spawn of Ogdo, you can unlock the chest that reveals Cal's love it or hate it poncho from the original game. The developers were definitely all over this one. Next up in 3rd is the Rancor. If you're looking for a major challenge, then the Rancor fight is probably the best one for you. Almost every move the Rancor does against you is a one-hit, one-kill move. The Rancor is an absolute beast, obviously. The fight starts out with an epic introduction by getting subtle clues that something has been continuously killing prospectors deep underground, and then you drop into a den for the final boss and a lone claw peers out from behind a cave pillar and out comes the iconic Rancor. As mentioned earlier, the boss fight is not for the faint of heart. Of course, if the Rancor does manage to get a hold of you, then you will be given the same treatment the Gamorrean Guard in Return of the Jedi was given, eaten up. Beating the Rancor is all about avoidance and carefully timed attacks because there is absolutely no room for error here. The design of the Rancor also looks really good with the graphics of this game, and the Rancor comes with a decent variety of moves to have to overcome. Also, the little bone that you can throw at the Rancor is a nice little callback to the Return of the Jedi too. This battle is almost too hard in a way because it's pretty anticlimactic if the Rancor just stomps on the ground and kills you instantly, but still a very cool looking and challenging boss fight that you may or may not see coming. The final boss fight with Dagan Guerra is by far the best of the Dagan Guerra fights and is my runner-up on this list. I don't know if any other boss fight in this game throws so many different moves at you over the course of the fight. Dagan incorporates many of the moves he uses in the first 2 battles, but adds plenty more to it as well. This fight does a great job of challenging the player to have to account for a variety of unique obstacles within the fight. Dagan will throw the Force at you in multiple ways, with slashing winds, vibrations from the ground, Force orbs, what have you. Dagan will throw them your way. He even makes himself a Force arm, which is a pretty cool concept as well. You sort of have the help of Bode in this fight, at least early on, until Dagan takes him out of the equation. There's a lot of Force confusion in this fight, as Dagan will enlist clones of himself to confuse and disorient the player. Of course, Force confusion plays a big part in this fight, since in the end, that's how Cal Kestis defeats Dagan Guerra, with a little Force trickery. Overall, a good fun fight, worthy of being the final boss, even though that's not what he turned out being. And then in 1st, it's Rick the Door Technician. Okay, so this is actually just an honorable mention, but this boss fight, in a way, is the best because it's probably the most memorable. Like, who in the world saw this coming? Rick dies pretty much instantly, but is still given the full boss treatment with a big health bar and boss fight animations. He deserved that much. Also, for me personally on my stream, this was a top moment for sure. If you want to see me stream, look me up on Twitch and drop me a follow at Cookie Plays Games Live. What the hell was that? Wow! Our actual winner is the Darth Vader boss fight with Cere. The Darth Vader and Cere Junda fight is an epic boss fight at its finest. After the goated moment from Jedi Fallen Order where Vader appears and kills Trilla, I wasn't sure if they would dip into the Darth Vader pool again, and if they did, I assumed it might be overkill. I feel pretty confident that I was wrong, because this was probably one of, if not the best moments in the whole game. First off, the cutscenes in this fight are top-notch. Darth Vader's entrance was beautiful, if not entirely unsurprising, but still, Darth Vader from the shadows is always a good look. Plus, the cutscenes in the middle of the boss fight were very well choreographed and included minimal dialogue, but no less impactful. Then there's the boss fight itself, which is great. For one, you get to try your hand at playing as someone other than Cal in a boss fight, which is cool, plus it's a Jedi Master who has trained herself back up to relevancy, making her fighting Vader all the more plausible. Vader, however, doesn't lose any of his intimidation despite nearly being bested in this fight. Vader's moves in the fight aren't overly dramatic, and I like that, since Vader in fights has always been more about raw power as opposed to using speed or other tactics. The fight does a good job of encapsulating that. Vader uses Force Choke repeatedly in the fight to draw you closer to him, but also to potentially just straight up kill you instantly like he's the Rancor or something. Very intimidating. This fight doesn't feel overly done because it just feels like two masters of the Force duking it out like you might see in a film. The arena they're fighting in, which is basically a burning Jedi library, makes for a perfect setting as well. And the ending where Cere is ultimately bested is filled with emotion and a well done score to boot. A great way to bring Vader back into the sequel without spoiling his great entrance in Fallen Order. Alright, so that is the 10 major boss fights in Star Wars Jedi Survivor ranked. Did you guys think I hit the mark, or did I miss completely? Let us know in the comments down below, and what other videos you may want to see from Star Wars Jedi Survivor moving forward. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications so you never miss more Jedi Survivor content, and we will see you in the next video. Bye for now.